in the Carabao Cup, where Newcastle got the win over Liverpool, finally putting an end to a difficult run over the years of finals that they've made but not been able to get over the line. Well, this time they did it in 2025. As you can see, they missed out at the final hurdle in the same cup in 2023, lost out in FA Cup back-to-back years back in the 90s, same in the 70s with League Cup and FA Cup, but the wait for a trophy is over and the celebrations are no doubt still going on in Newcastle. Let's get some of the reaction from the Newcastle camp yesterday.
Wow, unbelievable. No words needs. After 7 years, we just get it. I'm very happy. I think we did this for the fans. They deserve it. Wow, no words. It's still crazy things going into my head, but what a moment to be a Newcastle United fan.
Hopefully it's the first of many. I said, like, I didn't like saying it, but it did feel like a bit of a burden, I think. How long it had been. I think it was, we felt the pressure, but I felt it was just going to take that one time to break through that ceiling, and hopefully that's the start of many.
We now welcome in Mario Melchiot as well. Shaka's still smiling, as you can see. I don't even need to look. I can feel like the gleam coming from the side of my eye here. Craig, first time I've seen you since this result. It is rightly so, isn't it? It was totally deserved for Newcastle.
Oh, I mean, I've got to disagree a little bit with Stevie yesterday when he said Newcastle didn't do anything, have to do it. I thought Newcastle were great. I thought everything they did it fantastically well with pace, were incisive, could have scored more goals, had the offside goal ruled out. I think it was Guimaraes in front of the goalkeeper. Yeah. You could go through every facet of the Newcastle team, and it was excellent. And we talked about this a couple of days before. We said, what's a pathway to a Newcastle victory and finally break this sort of hoodoo of trophies? And it was twofold, Kay. It was Liverpool having an off day, which they did, and it was all of Newcastle's big players, and they're all big players, but I mean the kind of stars. It was all of those turning up, and that's exactly what happened. And when you put those two together, you get this kind of performance and this kind of result. You know, you can look at the middle of the park in Guimaraes and Tonali. You can look at Alexander Isak and Jacob Murphy and Joe Linton's, I just think, is a terrific player. When he was out of that Newcastle team, they felt it. But for me, the best, what epitomised Newcastle was Dan Burn. I thought he was absolutely just, it was like, this might never happen again. But you have to look at Arne Slot here. How can you leave Dan Burn to get picked up by Alexis McAllister after they've had at least 2 or 3 corners prior to that where they're markings only and McAllister's the block and it hasn't worked? And you could see it as clear as day that Newcastle had worked on it in the training ground, because that's where Trippier was pinging the ball. He was missing out the 6-yard box, he was playing it to the back, and they were looking for Burn to come in, either knock it in as he did, or knock it into the 6-yard box where you might get bits and pieces. Now, when it happens once, you might say, OK. When it happens twice, you have to make an adjustment. And Liverpool did not, and they paid the penalty. And I think, more than the tiredness, that summed up the sloppy nature of Liverpool's performance. In fact, we could say it's been a sloppy, 3 weeks for them? Maybe 4 weeks? Starting back when he named a very poor side, or a very weak side, for the FA Cup game at Plymouth, and they got beat. To me, that started to send a bit of a signal down the line. But Newcastle, absolutely brilliant. I was thrilled for them, just the way that they played.
I would say again, and just to, again, maybe start with the negative around Liverpool and the Dan Burn, or reluctance to pick him up. They had the warnings. There was one in the first half where Dan Burn came right over the top of McAllister, got ahead to it. It just narrowly missed Guimaraes, and nobody heeded that warning. Now, maybe you want to say Slot could have changed something at half-time, but kind of given the fact that either Slot didn't shout onto the park for there to be a change, or there was a lack of leadership from Liverpool on the park in the moment to recognise that mismatch. Whichever way, they paid the ultimate price. And credit to Dan Burn, again, for his performance, for his leadership, everything that he represented about that football club, and you cannot sing his praises highly enough. But at the same time, you go around every single player for Newcastle, and it's the same sentiment. Whether we want to talk about young Livramento up on the left, up against Mo Salah, and those stats have been making the rounds for both Livramento and Mo Salah. Whether you want to talk about Kieran Trippier on the other side and kind of give him some of the poor performances we saw from him 12 months ago, comes in and does not put a foot wrong, is the leader, is the experienced player that Newcastle needed to be in this big moment. The midfield speaks for itself. Tonali, given his issues and how he's come in and fit into this squad this season, has been exemplary. The two alongside him in Guimaraes and Joe Linton, again, you cannot sing their praises highly enough. Barnes coming in for the suspended Gordon. Again, everything just came together so well. They recognised the moment better than Liverpool, certainly. And while Liverpool have not been great for some time, this was as poor a performance as you'd seen or could expect from a team like them in the final. Really nothing to write home about as far as Liverpool were concerned. And I think a lot of that goes down to Newcastle and Eddie Howe.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the opposite manager with you, Mario, if I can, Arne Slot. As the guys were saying, that mismatch when you saw McAllister on Dan Burn, the zonal marking, the decisions here defensively from Arne Slot.
Yeah, I think Arne Slot, what he really did well for me, you understand, during the season is he learns from his mistakes really quickly. This was clearly a big mistake because if you have, like McAllister, 5'9", and a 6'2" defender, and you have to mark him. McAllister didn't even look at the ball sometimes. He just watched the player. And you know already, when you're watching a player and don't look at the ball, you know you're almost always late. Because when the ball is traveling, you are looking at him, he makes one fake, he goes the other way. So Burn was kind of in a situation, there was zonal marking because they had Van Dijk and Konate in the middle. And they kept on, just like Craig said, they have practiced this situation so well. Liverpool was always late. I know we talked about, you guys mentioned it, the tiredness and the situation they were going through, but it doesn't matter. This is a final, you understand? And you should not get surprised. And the way the two Brazilian kids brought the fight, and then the Italian, you understand, Tonelli, you understand how he brought it, Guimaraes and Jollington. I know he went to the fans. I know sometimes you can get carried away, but they were so ready for this final. And Liverpool did not know that this was going to happen to them. This was kind of like a surprise. Salah touched the ball, 4 times in the first half? Against a kid like Liverpool. Come on, if you play against a guy like that, it doesn't matter if it's a good player, but he's so experienced, so they needed him. But that means they were so ready and prepped and even could isolate him. And I think that was one of the biggest things they achieved.
I think you did him a disservice, Mario. Dan Burn, you can put about another 6 inches on him.
Yeah.
He's about...
He's listed at 6'7".
He's listed at 6'7". That's on a good day. But, Mo Salah, just briefly on Mo Salah, he started to look disinterested, hasn't he?
But what's that down to? Why has he been ineffective in this game against PSG, in this game against Newcastle? Is he not getting the service he needs, or is it something more than that?
He goes through these periods and he's got this... I don't know what the hell he's doing at the end of the season, but he looks fed up. He looked fed up when they went out of the Champions League. Well, you would be. He was pretty disinterested in this game in terms of his work rate, which was non-existent, almost as non-existent as his product at the other end. So he looks kind of fed up. But can I go back to... we can't spend the whole show on a header, but or corner kicks and how the marking. But this is about leadership. Something that Liverpool have had from Van Dijk. You don't have to look over to your manager when the 6'7" guys won 2 headers and it's put your team in peril. If you're Virgil van Dijk and it's happened twice in the first half and then they get another corner, right, I don't care what Arne Slot wants. We're not having this again. Either I'm going to go out and mark him or I'm going to get Ibrahim Konate to go out and stand on his toes. Right, I've made that decision. McAllister, you come in here and fill a space. But they didn't. And it's almost like they're so robotic these days, some of these players, that, the manager said, we have to have 4 across the edge of the box, and he has to do that. When it's not working on the field, Shaq, somebody has to take responsibility.
And that was the amazing thing for me, that nobody made the adjustment. And again, maybe you want to take some of the responsibility away from, some of the blame away from Arne Slot and say, well, it didn't get to half-time and he could have adjusted at half-time. But on the field, somebody's got to make that adjustment. And the other thing to it, and again, just kind of seeing the highlight again for the Dan Burn goal, Kwanzaa's man marking. I can't remember who it is, but Kwanzaa has got his arms around a player middle of the goal. So there are man-marking responsibilities. How nobody takes a man-marking responsibility on Dan Burn, given what you've seen for 44 minutes from every set piece up to that point, again, is simply beyond me. Now, if you want to say, well, we do zone, fair enough. But Kwanzaa is hugging a player in the middle, so there are man-marking responsibilities. Yet still, at 6'7", nobody man-marks Dan Burn. You leave that to McAllister, who's a solid foot shorter, maybe a little bit less. But still, that makes absolutely no sense.
I texted Stevie yesterday off the back of it, because I knew you guys were in. I said, it's a good job they have this gap over Arsenal.
Yeah.
I mean, really, because... And you have to give them credit for that. All the sort of hard work, the spade work was done in the first part of the season, where they were brilliant. But they're going to win the Premier League, and yet it feels, which is a great achievement, an amazing achievement, but it all feels a little flat. And dare I say it feels a little disappointing now, in the manner in which they went out of the FA Cup, and the manner of their performance in the Carabao Cup final, and the manner in which they were bossed pretty much for 180 minutes, or not quite, but they certainly did a good first half in the second leg, but the rest of it and the extra time they were bossed. And it almost feels like they're going to get and lift this Premier League title, and it feels a little bit disappointing, which is strange to say, because, you know, when Arne Slot comes in, you know, and Liverpool have only won it once in the last, I think, 30 so years, because, you know, when Jurgen Klopp did it, so it's a huge achievement. But at this moment in time, it doesn't feel that way. It feels that they've let the season really get away. And as I say, if that gap was 5 or 6 points to Arsenal, the way they're playing in the last few games, I would be really worried.
Now, obviously, fatigue and tiredness has been a big topic of conversation with Liverpool. This is what Arne Slot had to say on it. He said the game was slow, not intense, so it's difficult to judge if we were physically ready. Mentally, I prefer to look at how the game went exactly the way they wanted, with a lot of duels and a lot through the air. If we play 10 games of football through the air, they win 9 times, which led to the first goal and to the second.
What's he talking about?
Yeah.
What is he talking about?
He's talked a lot. He's talked a lot of sense in his time that he's come in. A lot. Generally, every press conference, good or bad, when most of the results have been good, but there's been the odd bad one, the PSG, and he was pretty honest after the first game in Paris. He said, outplayed, and he generally has been on the ball in his assessment about performances and referees and blah blah blah. What's he talking about here? I mean, corner kicks are part of the game.
Yeah, but to that point, I find this such a disservice to Newcastle's performance, because it makes it sound as though Newcastle were a Route 1 team, just launched it long, didn't really offer an awful lot else. And I feel Newcastle was so much better than that. Newcastle pressed Liverpool high up the park, stifled any kind of momentum that Liverpool could get. I've spoken about Mo Salah and how ineffective he was up against Livramento. That's got nothing to do with the air game. That's got nothing to do with Dan Burn's height. That's got nothing to do with set pieces and whether you're zonal mark or man mark. Mm-hmm. That's about Newcastle having a game plan and going about it in the best way to beat Liverpool Football Club, not allowing Liverpool to play their game. So to Craig's point, for everything we've kind of praised Arne Slot for up to this point, I find this disrespectful. I find that not giving Newcastle their just deserves, because Newcastle got it right. There's no question to this. Newcastle got it right.
Is Liverpool's season catching up with them then, Mario? What do you think he's talking about here, Slot?
Yeah. I think you know, like if you look at his background, right? Because when you come in Holland, it's not as intense. It's not as effective. You understand? We saw a game, give an example, against Nottingham Forest after international break. comes back, he lost the game. He comes to this game now, and all the points that Craig just highlighted, you know, Champions League, FA Cup, all those ones are like, sometimes when you come from a different place, you have to understand, in England, people can surprise you. And sometimes they don't have to surprise you with skill, because that is definitely what happened in the middle of the park to him. It wasn't beaten by skill only, it was beaten by character. And if we ask about, does Liverpool have character? Oh yes, they have enough. But Newcastle has some too. And the way they competed with them is kind of gave them the feeling like, guys, listen, you understand, they set back. Sometimes they played even one against one against the Liverpool side. They didn't mind Newcastle do that. They dropped off, let them play at the back, and then press them all the way one against one if they had to. And I think that is the prep of Eddie Howe. He prepped the team really well, and they were ready whatever Liverpool had. And I think energy level, they brought a lot of that in the game to Newcastle. So in a way, I think the cup finals are very interesting games. Why? Because you got to bring it on that particular day. You cannot sometimes not plan it in advance in the sense like, oh, I'm in a good form, I'm doing well. No, you got to bring it on that day. And Newcastle clearly brought it yesterday. They were ready from the first minute till the last minute. They did not mind. And they were a little shaky when Liverpool, of course, scored. Chiesa made that goal, but at the end they moved out and they did not care. They kept on, you know, fighting and making them feel like. I felt like watching the game, even after the game, I understood. It took so long, and all the emotions came out of the players too, in the sense of like saying, finally.
What does it mean for? Go on.
No, I was going to say the Guimarães giveaway in the middle of the park was very ill-timed, wasn't it? To say a better. To use a terminology. But what we have here, and Mario just highlighted it, was a manager who got his players to play to the top of their game in the biggest game of their season, and a Liverpool team who could not raise the game for one of their biggest games of the season. They've had many. But Eddie Howe read this Liverpool team like a book. He allowed them to be the set pieces, so they knew they were going to zonal mark, so they put Dan Burn to the back. Yeah. That worked. And B, he absolutely recognised that two of the weakest positions this year for Liverpool at times has been the right back and the left back. Even when Alexander Arnold's playing. Robertson's had his struggles, Tsimikas has had his struggles. It was Konsa and it was Robertson. And they've both, Konsa's less experienced in that position and Robertson has struggled. And they allowed Liverpool to come onto them, like the guys have said, had a good shape. When Liverpool coughed it up, they either hit them on the channel over Robertson or the channel over Konsa. And you have to give Eddie Howe a lot of credit, because he's just said, he's probably, listen, keep a shape, they'll push forward, this is where we can expose them. Because they have been a little weaker in those positions defensively at times this season, there's no doubt about it. And Newcastle played an absolute blinder. For all the Liverpool stuff and blah, 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 what we saw from Newcastle was... And they were unlucky in the Carabao Cup final against United, was it a couple of years ago? Yeah, 2 years. They actually played decent, but lost. This time they really upped their game.
And now, just kind of given what he means to the club, unless you are asking for some kind of civil war in the Northeast, you cannot sell Alexander Isak. Certainly not this summer. Newcastle still within touching distance, but I think it's a point outside of the top 5, which will bring Champions League football. They're already guaranteed European football. That adds to the coffers. That adds to Newcastle's financial position. So I don't see how Alexander Isak is allowed to leave. Now, the only other side to that is Alexander Isak goes in, recognising the strength of the position he is now in, to ask for a new contract and kind of up his own bidding in that regard. But there is absolutely no way Alexander Isak.
It's not only the fans and blah blah blah. When you feel that you're building a bit of momentum at a club, obviously the fans get very excited and they're certainly enjoying this moment. But they've seen quite a few recently, particularly at St James's Park, some really entertaining games. But also from a player perspective, you can smell it as a player.
Yeah.
You know, when your team are doing badly, it's hell. You know, going to training, it's horrible. You're looking at fixtures. Oh, where are we going to pick up the next points? It's blah, blah, blah. When your team are doing well and you get into cup finals and you're winning and you're pushing for the Champions League and you're really mixing it with the big boys, certainly domestically, as a player you feel that. And the last thing you want as a player is to see the club selling some of your best teammates. Because that's then saying to you, well, if you're selling Alexander Isak and I'm Bruno Guimaraes or Joe Linton or whoever it is, I say, well, you know, maybe if that's what we're doing and how we're operating the business, why am I going to stay? And that's a very difficult scenario because it can start a snowball domino effect of, well, if Isak's gone, I'm going. And that's a big problem, as Shaq mentioned, for Newcastle. Because, and also, you try to hold on to your manager. Yeah. And Eddie Howe, who was linked with the England job before him, he's one of the managers that does get linked now and again. So you cannot afford to sell your star asset. That being said, there's a few big clubs out there looking for an Alexander Isak, and they've got a few quid to spend. So that's going to test the market. So but I would like to think he would stay.
To your point about being a part of this dressing room now and feeling like you're onto something special, you're on the verge of something special. This isn't a Newcastle team that fluked their way to a final and got Liverpool on an off day. This is a Newcastle that beat Arsenal over 2 legs. And if beating them in the semi-final over 2 legs and then Liverpool in the final, that, for me, just says everything you want to know about that dressing room, how they feel right now, how they truly believe they're on the verge of building something. And you cannot afford to take away any of those pieces, let alone a foundation piece such as Alexander Isak.
I believe he was down in the lower leagues as a player,
he was,
as a youngster.
Yeah.
And he's now, you know, via Brighton and other teams, at his, you know, a club he supported, not there because people are feeling sorry for him, there because he's been doing a great job in several positions, by the way. And I think these stories are always a great fillip for younger players, that you just never give up. And here in a week where he's won Newcastle's first trophy for how many years?
70. Well, first major for 70
for 70 years, and he's a part of that. He's got a call up to his country. He's had an England call up. I mean, really, that's kind of made of dreams, isn't it?
And he's never been involved at any level. That's the crazy bit.
No, but you know, and I go back to it, and I don't want to sound sort of smarmy here, but it happens to a lot of youngsters, and all shapes and all sports, where you get discarded, and as a younger player, you're too big, you're too small, you're too slow, you're overweight, you're not talented enough, you can't do this, you can't do that. We've all heard it, and we've all seen, and the mental fortitude when that happens to you. I mean, fortunately, I didn't have that as a kid, but I saw lots of other youngsters, particularly at Chelsea when I was coming through, and I thought they were really good players, get discarded. And I saw the emotional distress, what that meant to a young boy being sent back to Wales or sent back to Ireland or sent back to the north of England, because they've been told after 2 years, busting a gut, that they're not good enough. And most kids, unfortunately, are youngsters. They don't come back from it because it's such a hammer blow. And so for all the youngsters out there,
Craig,
you know, just never give up. Just never, ever give up.
Isn't it... I like what you say. You know why I like what you say? Because we all had it. I don't think there is any professional, whatever you do, or you know, you don't even have to be an athlete, but just in anything, you will always get that knockdown. You understand? But it's just how you bounce back. And I really, his story was incredible because, and also what you highlighted, it's like all of us had that. But the thing is that people think sometimes, you know, you knock someone down and you think like, because sometimes you can also get knocked down by the person that didn't make it and try to put it on you because he didn't make it, then he doesn't want you to make it. But the way this kid, you understand, and then scoring a goal, but then we didn't even highlight the second goal, what Isak did to Van Dijk when he stepped off him and making sure that he got himself in a position where he could do it in one touch, just touch the ball in the corner. And just overall, you understand, when we look at the goals they scored, it were all goals, was definitely those kind of goals that you practice on. And then you practice so long, and now you get a situation, and the cross comes in, Murphy wins the header, and then Isak waits. He says, I'm not a striker, but the way he stepped off, he stood close to Van Dijk, steps off him, and the ball drops exactly there. What did he do? Bang, goal. And all those points that I talk about this team is that it was a lot of prepping and a lot of execution that worked really well on the day.
Yeah.
I feel like getting up and walking over to that, just behind that monitor that I'm pointing at and getting the tissues. I'm only joking, but you know, like talking.
Because it's so lovely. It's so lovely.
It's just so. It's just.
It is.
It's just so.
It's because Arsenal beat Chelsea in the Premier League at the weekend 1-0. Mikel Merino with the header. But what to make of the comments after the game from Mikel Arteta saying that Chelsea had the best attack in the Premier League? He said, in my opinion, they're the best attacking team in the league by a mile. The stats say it. Everything I've seen says it in open play.
Right. We've had a good 25 minutes of being nice, right? That stops here and now, right? What the hell? What loopy juice is he on? What the hell is he talking about? Now, Chelsea played some really nice stuff at the start of the season. There is no doubt about that. And even when they were playing their best stuff, which was good, they were not the best attacking team in the country, right? They were not. Since the turn of the year or thereabouts, that fast, direct, quick transition play has fizzled out. You only had to look at yesterday's game as a sort of gauge to where they are. They were so weak in attack that Arsenal, who, by the way, Arsenal know they're a team that are not going to win the league. Right, and they played like a team that are not going to win the league. They played like a team that was in second gear, that have bigger fish to fry. And they even said to Chelsea, in times during this game, I tell you what, have the ball, we'll just sit in, keep a nice shape. And Chelsea did absolutely diddly squat with it. Arsenal won this game without breaking any kind of sweat. But this is... I don't know where he gets this stuff from. I don't know, where managers come up with this guff, because it is. It's just ridiculous.
Mario, would you like to defend your former team here and their attack and see if you can find anything in Arteta's comments?
No, not really, because I think the only thing I could say, they had maybe a striker and he didn't, you understand? And so that will be Jackson, you understand, had been up and down, and now that the injury is on, we can see that he's a big miss. And then, okay, you cannot highlight Palmer as a striker because he clearly isn't, but he scored a lot of goals for them. No, I understand, look, in the sense of like the way what he said, they have the best attack. Look, they work together. He's not going to slack him off. He's not going to attack him. But what he said, the compliment that he gave him, I understand you want to give each other compliments, but it didn't really work. I mean, Chelsea didn't turn up. They were not, you understand, they had more of the ball, but I've seen that a number of times when they play. It's like, you got to make sure you penetrate. If you just hold the ball in the team and go left, right, it doesn't matter. That's just, I have the ball, and what? What do you do with it? Sometimes you got to be direct. And that is the thing with him. Defensively, Arsenal had one tactic. Keep moving, because sometimes they will struggle. Reece James sometimes right back, then Fofana centre half, then right back. Then it became a mess at the back. And then in the middle of the park they struggled too. They didn't understand the defenders' problems. Then in the middle, and then the attackers. So the whole line for Chelsea at the moment now is a problem, and that is what they got to look for. They got to understand that the spine of the team is not working well.
Well, it's interesting that it wasn't only Mikel Arteta who's been criticised by the fans for what he said after the game, because Enzo Maresca also said this about his team. I think overall we struggled a bit in the first 20 minutes, but after that we controlled the game, we created some chances. Second half the game was there, 50-50. He's insisting that his side controlled the game, Shaka.
I'm looking at the stats from the game on Sunday. Chelsea had 0.35 expected goals. Now, make what you like of expected goals as a stat, but if you have 0.35 and you control the game for 70 minutes, I'm not sure how to explain what we all witnessed.
Yeah.
Listen, the only chance I can remember, and if you want to call it that, only moment of concern that Chelsea kind of forced on Arsenal was a David Raya mistake, where the ball just skirted, for some reason, was straight at him, and he let it through his hands and clipped off his ankle and went wide. Other than that, I can't think of Chelsea really troubling Arsenal. So it makes these statements from both managers all the more confusing, which can only lead me to believe that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with Chelsea, which for starters, I don't understand why, because kind of given where they had been over previous seasons and how good we'd seen Chelsea in the first half of this season, I would not have thought in a month of Sundays that Maresca would have been in any kind of trouble. But both those statements, it sounded like, Maresca sounded like he is making a case for his job, for the job that he's doing. And in Arteta's case in the statement, he is making a case for a good friend of his to keep this job despite what we're all seeing with our eyes. Other than that, nothing makes sense about this. Nothing makes sense about Arteta's statement, Maresca's statement, the stats that we're looking at, what we saw with our own two eyes. So it has to be something more to it, which, again, I don't agree with if that's the case, but I certainly can't explain.
It's a love fest. The two of them were at City together, weren't they?
Yeah, well that's the thing. I mean, but why though? I mean, it was a poor game. You didn't play well.
The game, it was a bore fest. I mean, it should have been played behind closed doors. I mean, it wasn't worth watching. You got one team that knows it can't win the league and played, as I said, played at a training match pace, and the other side in Chelsea, that all the good players sort of fizzled out. All the good stuff from the start of the season is pretty much gone, and that's exactly what the game was. And yet Arsenal still managed to turn up with their pyjamas on and take an easy 3 points off this Chelsea side. So none of it sort of makes sense. But next year comes around, if they beef this squad up in the summer, which I think they will, particularly up front, if they're faltering next year, we're going to get to the point where we're not looking at the squad, we're looking at the manager. And that's something he's going to have to fix quick, because people will start saying, well, he can't get us over the line. Well, he can't get us to there, and he can't get us to there. And, you know, other managers have. Not at Arsenal since Wenger, but other managers at other clubs, like Arne Slot, like managers at Chelsea, like managers at City. And it's going to come round fast to him. So he can come out with all this stuff he wants and all this sort of statistical nonsense. At the end of the day, he's probably going to have at least another season to sort this out. And if he doesn't, he could be the next manager on the hot seat, because he's had quite a few years now, Mr. Arteta, and it is really time. And they've spent a lot of money. And it is time, I think, for them really, really to take it to the next level. And he's got to be the man to do that, otherwise he'll be out.
Yeah, well, speaking of managers that really are in trouble right now, Ange Postecoglou is where we'll be heading next, because obviously Spurs lost their game to Fulham at the weekend. That finished 2-0. You can see where they are in the table here. They have dropped to 14th. It's 34 points after 29 games for Spurs. And there's a lot of talk about who is going to be the next Premier League manager to leave. Ange Postecoglou is 3-1. There's reports that there's already been a two-man shortlist made as to who's going to replace him, that they've already identified who's going to be coming in the summer, or at least their targets for this. But this is what we're looking at right now with Ange Postecoglou. Mario, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, look, we already knew, we understand. He talked about it himself as well. When he came in, he was the likable guy. The way he was playing football, we all enjoyed it, because we thought Spurs was going to have a different identity than we were used to. For a long period of time, then we thought, okay, now they found someone that could match their beautiful stadium. Then eventually we figure out that they have so many injuries and things don't work well for them. Now he comes out, and then there's the crucial games that you should at least, you should win. This is a derby game. I understand that Fulham is doing better, but Fulham is not in the criteria what Spurs is as a team, as a club. It's a bigger club. But then things like this happen to you. It should not happen. And he knows it for himself too. I feel sorry for him, but tactically, I said it before, he should have adapted his tactics, but he never wanted to. So that's why he puts himself in a difficult situation.
It feels like it's only a matter of time, doesn't it? It just does. I mean, they have Eintracht Frankfurt in the quarterfinal of the Europa League. That's going to be a tough game for them, because they sort sort of hopped over the line against AZ Alkmaar. It just feels like it's not going to turn around. He's reacting to the crowd now. He's reacting to supporters when he's walking into dressing rooms and up tunnels. He's reacting to, and it's hard not to, because we've all had it. But sometimes you've just got to sort of blank it out and go on. And the more you react to it, the more headlines there are, and the more suggestions that you're simply losing the plot. When I talk about Chelsea's season fizzling out, man, I know they've had injuries, but where he took them to when he first came in, that we all, I think, said, isn't this might not be successful, but isn't it just great to watch?
Breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it was, and it was. And I won't have anybody say it wasn't entertaining, and it wasn't a lovely change to see Tottenham playing that way. And then you have the injuries and the discussion and the debate. Well, is it the injuries, or is it his training and his methods and his way that he goes about the games, what he asks of his players, is that causing it? And there is some historical evidence when he was at Celtic to suggest, yes, that he could be a part of that. But I have to say now, I've gone from loving watching this Postecoglou's Tottenham side 12 months ago to really not want to watch them now, because it's all the same. They haven't learned from the defensive mistakes. The sort of fizz has gone out of their attack. They still leave themselves open. And it just feels that this Postecoglou side, even when Romero's back and when Van de Ven is fully fit and all that sort of stuff, it just feels that they'll make the same mistakes again. And I do feel that they're going to have to win the Europa League at the very minimum for him even to have a 50-50 chance of staying in this job. And I don't think they'll do that. And I think it's only a matter of time before one of the other managers mentioned is in the job. And if it was me, and I don't want to talk about a manager being sacked when he's not, but it looks like he's going to be, and I would go hell for leather to get the Bournemouth manager.
They've got him on the list apparently for this summer. Andoni Iraola.
Marco Silva's a very good manager.
Also on the list.
I know, I read the paper. There was only two.
In case you didn't.
It's a good guess. They're both good, but I just, for me, if you look at Areola from his time in Spain to what he's done at Bournemouth, and I know there's a body of work for Marco Silva as well, Everton apart, that's been very good. I just feel he's got that bit of stardust to go in and do that job. But I don't know about you, Shah. I think it's a waiting game.
No, to your point, for Postecoglou to stay, he's got to win the Europa League. Europa Conference.
No, isn't it? It's the Europa League.
Is that where they're in? At the very least. Otherwise, let the writing otherwise is on the wall. And listen, I've sat here and defended Postecoglou for most of this season, and then I felt the game against Spurs right at the turn of the year, the game against Newcastle right at the turn of the year, where he was remonstrating with the referee, and I thought at that point he lost it, and he never really got it back. To Craig's point, starts arguing with fans, and it's everybody's fault but his own. And while absolutely yes, the injuries is an issue, and the injuries takes away from who you can be at your best self, at no point did Spurs get any better. At no point did they make any adjustments. At no point did they look like they were being coached. And that's on Postecoglou. If at least you are competing, if at least you're improving, you can make the argument. But I'm not sure that you could claim either. So for me, it really is simply a matter of time. That time probably running out last day of the season.
Massive game and a massive result for Barcelona as we take a look at La Liga's table. They are top, level on points with Real Madrid, but they've played a game less. Atleti 4 points back of the top two right now as it stands. Barcelona with that make-up game against Osasuna coming up on March 27th. This is some of the reaction from the papers. A big blow to the title race in Sport and Marca both saying the same thing. Barca, a big blow from them and really stamping their authority right now in this title race. Where does it leave them, Craig? Big favourites?
No. And I'll tell you why. And Barca fans seemingly don't want to hear this. Their front line, which wasn't brilliant yesterday for long periods, and don't forget, the 4-2 is a little bit, smoke and mirrors. because the fourth goal comes because Atleti are desperate and they tried a throw in across the edge of their own box, which they got caught out. And then the deflection, Lamine Yamal was the deflected goal that was the third goal. Was that this high line that they play was only bailed out by the forwards. Continuation of trying to run up the field and catch people offside got undone twice, at least twice in this game, and that's why they found themselves 2-0 down. Now, the argument is, are we going to score enough goals? And the evidence so far is probably yes. Are we going to score enough goals between now and the end of the season and all the major, the Copa del Rey, which is coming up, the Champions League, and domestically in La Liga, to offset the fact that we're going to get caught out at the back? And there's a big debate whether one of them is going to outweigh the other. But you cannot deny the two Atleti goals came from bonkers defending again, which I've always said could be the thing between now and the end of the season that catches them out. So, no, for me, they're not big favourites. They're in a good position, but boy, there are still some major deficiencies within this team, and they're not at the front end of the field. They're at the other end.
On the one hand, from an Atletico Madrid perspective, at least you do well. The good silver lining is you don't have Champions League football to contend with. The others two do. So we see how they cope with those continued midweek exertions. Sid Lowe made a point on the show yesterday, so excuse me if I butcher it, that for going back 13 weeks, the team sitting top of the table had not won. One exception when Barcelona did not play, which means kind of sitting top of the league has been a little bit of a poison chalice. Nobody's been able to really take command of that position, and as a result, build on it and force the other two to chase meaningfully. So all this just to suggest that this is going to go right down to the wire, kind of given what we've seen over recent weeks, and just kind of given the parity between all three of those teams. Any of those three in particular are a match on the day. Now it just comes down to how you handle that pressure running in against the rest of the league. But this, for me, is a long way from over, because so many in the league have shown that they're able to take points off the top three at any given week. You know,
especially when your team is in the up. Now, look, the result also, when they're playing against a team like Atletico, what was the good part in the game? In the beginning, the system, the way Atletico plays and the tradition that we know, they sit and wait and have the patience, because incredible patience they have, to wait for their opportunity. Okay, they go up, and then later on you could see that energy that they lost, you understand, during the week with that big game for them, and then playing this game, another big one, you could see that took their toll on them, because physically you could see that they couldn't keep up with what they normally is like bread and butter for them, because the running, the fighting, they turning up, and the energy is sparking everywhere. They couldn't do that against Barcelona, because what Barcelona did, they kept the ball and made them moving around, especially at the end part when they started winning. They kept on playing with them and trying to get through it, because you could also see that Yamal was doing the opportunity that Yamal gets the first half. He didn't score that goal, but it was the way they cut right through them. And then, you understand, so that's why it's a situation we talk about, of course, they will miss a player. But away from that, I feel like for Atletico, now, what Chuck highlighted, no Champions League playing might be a very important situation for them, because they lose so much energy the way they play. It could actually help them now and just focusing on one thing, while the other two are still fighting for the big trophy. I mean, they're both big, being champion of your country, but then also including the Champions League to it.
Well, they've got this big Copa del Rey game now against Barcelona coming up, second leg, 4-4 from the first one. So, they would want less games to have a push at this La Liga title, but that's another big competition they're out. So I'm imagining they are not looking to be going out the Copa del Rey just so that they can have a run in the league. So there's some big games to come up for both. They've just had, there's bad weeks in a football parlance, and there's really bad ones. and they're in the particularly with the way they've gone from a 2-0 lead to losing it like that, the deflections, and then the Alvarez penalty controversy in the Champions League game against Real Madrid. It can get worse than that, but not much.
Yeah. In MLS, we had Atlanta taking on Inter Miami. Remember, a bit of a repeat of those playoffs last season when Atlanta shocked them. But we did see Messi from the start in this one. He's been having a bit of a rest. 11th minute, though, it would be Latelat who opens the scoring for Atlanta.
It's a really nice header from Latelat. Ball stood up by Lennon. Good jump, controlled header. Nice finish.
As mentioned, Messi's back on the pitch, back on the score sheets.
Back showing off, basically. Gets caught here and then... Yeah. I mean, he would have done that if it was a World Cup final, a Champions League final.
Yeah.
So, he'll do that all day long in Major League Soccer.
The 89th minute, Jordi Alba would find Fafa Picoult on the back post.
Very nice header. I'm not sure what Craig is suggesting. Good ball by Jordi Alba. Good header back across.
Messi swapping shirts with Miguel Almiron after that. As we take a look at the standings right now, Inter Miami top 10 points from 4 games ahead of Philadelphia and Columbus at this early stage of the season. So Messi's had to pull out of the Argentina squad. Javier Mascherano had defended the usage of his star player, revealed that they'd been in constant contact with the Argentina doctors. This is the upcoming schedule for Argentina at World Cup qualifying, CONMEBOL action against Uruguay and Brazil coming up in this window. And there'll be a lot more talk about this on the latest edition of Football Americas. Alexis, Herc, Mau and Ali Moreno have you covered for the latest show. Welcome into the latest edition of Extra Time. We've got Mario, Shaka and Craig here to answer your questions. Feeling a bit tired over there, Craig?
No.
Okay. He got all happy and emotional earlier about Newcastle United, didn't he?
Oh, no.
He's a big softie, really.
That is true. But I enjoyed Newcastle's performance.
You're always welcome to the big market, Craig.
Sorry?
Always welcome to the big
I've
market.
had a little venture around the big market now and again.
We absolutely should.
No, I'm talking about back in the heyday.
Yes. Never been.
Yeah, really, Shaka, all right. Mario, it feels like Slot plays the same team most of the time. How many legit run of games have we seen Elliott, Gakpo, Chiesa, Morton, Jones, etc. play to find their footing when healthy? Is it philosophy or a lack of trusted options?
No, because I think he's trying to keep his momentum going. That's why he's playing him all the time. But he has to be careful, because if you, as a manager, you need your full squad, because you clearly need to make sure that they're always up to task and up to speed. And now he saw it in this game. It didn't work out. And like I mentioned prior to this, it was like national team games where he plays with the same team, comes back, plays the players again. They didn't win that game. I mean, the Nottingham Forest one. But then he needs to learn really quickly, because it's going to happen a lot of times in the Premier League. The games are fast, and the recovery, you need your full team. So you need to play everybody, and including the ones that you might not start that much.
Jones has played a lot. So has Gakpo.
So they've got no Premier League team who've used fewer players than Slot. None of the 7 teams who've made fewer lineup changes are in Europe either. So in terms of sticking with that same squad, though, even if there were changes in the FA Cup game, he doesn't seem to like to change them too much.
It's his choice, isn't it? And as I say, Chiesa has had some injury issues. Again. Harvey Elliott's had some impact off the bench mainly, but Curtis Jones and Cody Gakpo have played a fair amount of games. So there's been some rotation. Tsimikas and Robertson have rotated. Kanate was out for a bit. Alexander-Arnold was out for a bit. So it's not like they've played. I know what you mean.
But you don't think this is going to be too much of a concern then?
Where? Well, for what?
In terms of the tiredness and the fatigue setting.
Well, they've got such a big gap now. They could roll over the line.
Yeah.
But as I was pointing out on the live show, if they hadn't got that buffer, I would be concerned. Even with Arsenal not playing brilliantly, certainly in the league, and missing some players. Just that very G-up, if you were Arsenal and you saw Liverpool struggling and you were 4 or 5 points behind, that's like a burst of energy. Right, that we can get these. We're a long, long way from that, so I don't see it being an issue.
For all, as a player, have any of you had as great a week as Dan Burn had last week?
No, I don't. Listen, scoring for your hometown club, who hasn't won major silverware for 70 years. I'm not sure how it gets better than that.
The ESPN FC, right? With Dan, I would pay money for this. I'd pay money for this. A considerable amount of money. For Dan Burn to be stood there and Dan Thomas stood next to him.
Have you ever seen the photo of me and Dan? Me and Dan had to do a photo shoot for ESPN. We stood back to back. It is hilarious. And Dan Burn is 3 inches taller than I am.
Is it like the cover of
Although
Twins?
that being said, slightly worrying from a vertical standpoint. I was watching the broadcast yesterday on the Atleti-Barcelona game, and at half-time I'm going, do you know what? There's not a lot in it here. Sid Lowe, Luis Garcia. I mean, unless
Yamal come on at the end of the game and he was towering over all three.
Unless Dan was wearing a set of high heels.
Highly possible.
Could happen.
Yes.
Each to their own. It's a personal preference. Unless he was wearing the old stilettos.
Wedges.
Then there wasn't a lot of leeway between that three.
That's very true.
Yeah, did you notice that?
I did.
And then Lamine Yamal come over. He looked like Barcelona's Dan Burn.
He looked like Dan Burn.
I mean, God, that was my one takeaway from that whole 4 hours of live TV.
Well, yeah, that. Definitely don't let Mario guesstimate their heights, because it'll get even worse for them.
No, I made a mistake. Come on, Kenny. Why you have to come for me like that? Come on. I said 6'2", but I meant to say 6'6". I meant to say 6'6". But I don't know. Hey, sorry, I put my hands up.
I honestly think with Sid, Luis and Dan, I think you could put a top hat on them and they could still walk under a bed. Anyway.
Anyway, we move on. Have you ever had as good a week as Dan Burn, Mario?
No. I think what Shaka said was perfect. You understand? Because, if you win in that moment when you are that, and sometimes you don't want to take somebody else's shine. Let him take his shine, because it was a beautiful moment for him. The only thing I said to you before, them hips, no, my friend. Come to the Caribbean. We teach you proper hips, man. This is stiff. It's stuck.
All right, for all. No, we've done that. Chaka, would you rather be at Carnival or in Newcastle right now?
Oh, Newcastle right now. Carnival is good, but it's coming back next year.
What do you think was happening? I'm being serious. Obviously, there was thousands of Newcastle fans down in London, so it'd been a late. If they travel back up north, it'd been a late one for them. But I mean, I would have imagined the city centre in Newcastle generally would have been absolutely packed. So I could imagine.
It still is.
I would imagine. Is it a scenario where, like the town I came from as a kid, they had local amateur teams, and when they won these sort of cups, blah blah blah, they used to keep the pubs open,
right,
like all night. I would imagine.
Yeah. Today was a holiday.
Oh, yeah.
Today was an enforced holiday in Newcastle, I'm absolutely sure. Because nobody showed up.
Yeah.
More to the point. I think the place should have gone correct. Wow, sure it did.
Absolutely. They know how to party up there. All right. Mario, Maresca and some Chelsea players came out after yesterday's game and said they were better than Arsenal and deserved more out of the game. Can they really believe what they're saying, or are they saying that because it's the easy answer when talking to the media?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you come to the media, you're never going to say something that, hey, it's not really working, it doesn't work, it doesn't look like there's any light at the end of the tunnel for us and stuff like that. No. I don't think so. I think if they clearly sit down and look at the game, it's like what they're going to highlight it. Like we talked about prior to it, is yeah, you had longer the ball, you had more of the ball, but you don't penetrate. You didn't have no danger. We highlighted the mistake of Sanchez flipped a couple of balls in the box for them, and that was already strange for me. Instead of catching them, so that put Chelsea under pressure. Then Raya made a mistake, and that was probably Chelsea's biggest chance. So having those moments, no, I felt like Arsenal, the way Arsenal turned up was different than we normally know Arsenal. They normally possess and control the game and the tempo of it. Chelsea had longer the ball, and where did they have the ball? Yeah, at the back line. But that's no danger. If you have the ball longer and you be more penetrating and being more goal dangerous, yeah, then I say like, ooh, yeah, you were definitely the better one. At this point, I wouldn't say that. So I think they just said that to protect whatever is coming ahead for them, what's going to be ahead for them.
Do the guys also think that apart from the personnel issues due to injury, there are also tactical issues in Pep's technique leading to the current situation at Man City?
Yeah. Yeah, because when players are at their peak fitness and performance, then you can operate in the manner in which he has been. And in a similar sense, it's the same scenario at Tottenham, where we have a manager trying to do the same things when he hasn't got the same players available, and then they're making the same mistakes and same problems are appearing almost on a regular basis. So I think when you can look at a manager and praise him to high heavens when it's going well, you can also have a constructive criticism when they're not performing well, and he has to shoulder some of the blame for that. Trying to do the same things with players that are not as good and as experienced is pretty much folly.
Last question. For a better balance, would it be smart for Real Madrid to sell one of its front three players and invest the funds in a number 9 like Isak? If so, which one would you sell?
Well, to that point, the easy answer is Rodrigo, because you don't see them selling Kylian Mbappe or Vinicius Jr. But then Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. both prefer to play on the left-hand side. So if you're bringing in a number 9, all of a sudden you have 2 left-sided players and a number 9. So again, it doesn't work. Rodrigo is the one actually providing the balance, because he can float anywhere. He can play, well, right now Kylian Mbappe plays through the middle more times than not, but Rodrigo can fill in there. He's occupying the right-hand side. So he's the one who's actually making the front three work, as well as it is. The other two, well, I mean, I guess the question, we could speculate hypothetically, but Real Madrid aren't sending either of those two. They really are.
I think they're fine as they are, right? Yeah.
They might win the they're still in the Copa del Rey, right? They might win the Champions League, might win La Liga.
Time will tell.
So, I know what the question means, but
they need Dan Burn. That's who Real Madrid.
Well, doesn't everyone? Doesn't
I was just about to.
They need Dan
Easy now,
Burn.
Saka. Easy now. Easy now.
Solve all your
Easy
issues.
now. I know
Dan
you're a
Burn will solve
Newcastle
all
guy, but
your-
easy now.
See, I'm just talking to myself.
I'm sorry, we're talking.
I was going to do what you did during the show.
What?
You went on very professionally. You went on an app and you started looking up some stats.
Yeah.
I was going to do the same there, and I thought, why bother?
But I thought, what are you talking about with Chelsea? What chances? So I looked it up during the show.
You were obviously a bit quicker than me.
Yeah.
To look it up. But then I realised it was extra time, and I thought, what the bloody hell are you doing?
And not looking it up means we can end the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go down the
let's
big
do it,
market.
shall we?
Could catch the last
I know.
flight. Go down the big market.
Let's go and catch a flight to the northeast of England. That would be
whoa.
wonderful.